Canada and the United States have been best friends, biggest trading partners, and next-door neighbors for over a century. But right now, in May 2026, that relationship is cracking. There are billions of dollars in tariffs. There are stalled negotiations. There's a Canadian Prime Minister who says he refuses to chase what he calls a small deal, and there's a looming July deadline that could change the North American economy forever. Today, we are breaking all of it down. Stay until the end because the July deadline alone could affect your wallet, your job, and your country's future. Let's get into it. To understand what's happening today, we need to go back a little. The United States, Canada, and Mexico are connected by one of the most important trade agreements in the world. The USMCA, also known in Canada as CUSMA, this agreement allows goods to flow freely across borders, keeping prices low for consumers on both sides. But under President Donald Trump, the United States has imposed heavy tariffs that's basically taxes on imported goods on Canadian steel, aluminum, copper, auto parts, lumber, and more. And in early April 2026, Washington made things even worse. The U.S. changed the rules on how tariffs are calculated for products containing steel and aluminum. Instead of taxing only the metal content, they now apply a 25% surcharge on the total value of the product. That means Canadian manufacturers, from car makers to construction companies, are suddenly paying far more to sell their goods in the U.S. market. This isn't a small bump in the road, this is a major disruption to decades of economic partnership. So, what has Canada done in response? Prime Minister Mark Carney's government just announced $1.5 billion, that's about $1.1 billion, in aid to help Canadian companies hurt by these new U.S. tariff rules. That is a significant amount of money going directly to Canadian businesses trying to survive the economic pressure coming from Washington. But Carney isn't stopping at writing checks. He's also been very public about Canada's position in negotiations. In a recent CBC interview, he said, and I'm paraphrasing here, that Canada and the U.S. could resolve this entire dispute within days if Washington had the bandwidth and inclination to sit down and work through it. He also made something very clear. Canada will not be chasing what he called a small deal. Carney pointed to other countries like the UK, Japan, and European nations who rushed to cut deals with the Trump administration. And according to Carney, those countries are not happy with what they got. Canada's message is simple. We want a real deal or no deal at all. Now here's where things get interesting domestically in Canada. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre has been pushing Carney hard. He wants Carney to publicly state what leverage Canada actually has in these negotiations. What cards is Ottawa holding? Carney's response: he rejects the word leverage entirely. He prefers to call Canada's energy resources and critical minerals, things like oil, natural gas, and rare earth metals, not as threats but as opportunities. That is a subtle but very important distinction. Carney is trying to negotiate as a partner, not an adversary. Whether that strategy is working well, that's debatable. Because here's the problem. According to the U.S. ambassador to Canada, trade negotiations between the two countries have been completely stalled since the fall of 2025. That means for months there have been essentially nitrogen monoxide real talks happening and the clock is ticking. Here is the most important part of this entire story, and it is not getting nearly enough attention. The USMCA, the trade deal between Canada, the US, and Mexico, is scheduled for a mandatory review in July 2026. This is a moment where the entire framework of North American trade could be renegotiated, extended, or allowed to collapse. Prime Minister Carney has built his entire economic plan around this review going well. He has promised to attract $1 trillion in investment into Canada by the year 2030. But economists say that plan depends almost entirely on getting a solid trade deal renewal this summer. If the July review goes badly, if tariffs stay high, if talks break down, if no agreement is reached, Canada's already fragile economy could take a serious hit. Per capita GDP in Canada is already depressed. Unemployment is still elevated. Businesses are holding back investments because of uncertainty. And Carney himself has said something striking, something that would have been unthinkable just a few years ago. He told Canadians that their close economic ties to the United States, once considered Canada's greatest strength, have now become a weakness. That is a powerful statement from a sitting Prime Minister. So let's bring this down to earth. What does any of this actually mean for you? If you are in CANADA, workers in the auto sector, steel industry, and forestry are already feeling the pain. Companies are uncertain about the future, which means fewer new jobs and less investment in communities that depend on trade with the U.S. If you are in the United States, you are paying more for Canadian goods whether you realize it or not. Tariffs get passed on to consumers. That means potentially higher prices on cars, building materials, and manufactured products that rely on Canadian steel and aluminum. And if this July deadline passes without a deal, analysts warn the economic damage on both sides of the border could deepen significantly. This is not just a political story. This is a story about jobs, prices, and the economic future of two of the world's closest allies. The Canada-US trade war is one of the most consequential stories of 2026, and the next few months will define where this relationship goes. Will Carney get his real deal? Will Washington come back to the table? Will the July review save or sink North American trade? We are going to be watching this closely and bringing you updates as things develop. If you found this video valuable, please hit the like button. It helps more people find this channel. Subscribe Canada Insight so you never miss an analysis. And drop a comment below. Do you think Canada is playing this right, or is Carney making a mistake by refusing a smaller deal? I'll see you in the next one.